7 years is a long time to stay away from a place you once called home. When I finally drove my old pickup down that narrow gravel road again, I felt a mix of nostalgia and determination. The road itself hadn't changed much, the same dips and bumps rattled the truck, the same line of tall oaks guarded both sides, and the faint smell of pine and lake water still hung in the air. But as I got closer to the cabin my grandfather left me, I could already sense that something wasn't right. The weeds were taller than I remembered, the mailbox was nearly buried in wild grass, and the paint on the fence had long since peeled away. Still, it was my land, my inheritance, and my connection to the man who taught me everything about hard work and respect. I wasn't prepared for what, or rather who, was waiting. Standing like a sentry at the end of the driveway was a woman I barely recognized at first. Arms crossed tightly, a pair of oversized sunglasses shielding her eyes, and that expression of pure authority plastered on her face. It didn't take long for me to put the pieces together. This had to be Karen. Even back then, before I left, she had a reputation for sticking her nose into everyone's business. She had a voice that carried across yards, a habit of filing complaints about the smallest things, and now, apparently, she had upgraded her role to self-appointed queen of the HOA. She wasn't on my property to welcome me back, she was there to block me, to stand in my way as if she held the title deed herself. I pulled the truck into the overgrown driveway, cut the engine, and stepped out. Before my boots even touched the gravel, Karen was marching toward me. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice sharp enough to slice through the morning air. "You can't be here. This land is under HOA control now." At first, I thought she had to be kidding. Maybe this was her idea of a joke. After all, I had been gone a long time. So I chuckled lightly and said, "Actually, this land belongs to me. My grandfather left it to me, and I've got all the paperwork to prove it." Her face turned red instantly, like a kettle ready to boil over. "Impossible," she snapped. "The HOA absorbed this property years ago. You abandoned it, and according to our rules, it reverted to the association." I took a step closer, calm but firm. "With all due respect, your rules don't override county property laws. I have the deed. This is my land." Her jaw clenched so tight I thought she might crack a tooth. She looked me up and down like I was some intruder trespassing on her castle. The problem was, Karen had convinced herself, and maybe others, that anything within her reach belonged to her HOA kingdom. To her, I wasn't the rightful owner coming home, I was just an obstacle in the way of her control. Ignoring her rant, I walked past and pulled out my grandfather's old key. The lock on the cabin door was stiff, but it turned. The smell of dust and age rushed out as I pushed the door open, and for a moment, memories came flooding back, summers on the porch with my grandfather, fishing trips on the lake, late-night fires crackling inside while he told me stories about the old days. It was more than just land to me, it was history, family, and peace. But the peace didn't last long. From behind me, Karen's voice screeched like nails on a chalkboard. "I'm warning you. You're trespassing, and you'll regret this." I turned and leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, trying not to laugh at the absurdity. "Karen, I think you're confused. I don't need permission to stand on my own land. Maybe you've been here too long, but this isn't HOA property. It's mine." She let out a bitter laugh, almost a growl. "We've maintained this place for years. We landscaped, we trimmed trees, we kept this area clean. You left it to rot, and the HOA stepped up. That means we control it now." Her words made it clear, this wasn't about community service, it was about power. She thought effort gave her ownership, as if mowing a lawn or hosting a block party magically rewrote the law. And if she had been using this land for HOA events like she claimed, then she had been trespassing for years. I looked her square in the eyes and said, "Maintaining something doesn't make it yours. That's not how ownership works, and you know it. I've got tax receipts going back years. I've been paying for this place, even while I was gone. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in her expression. But she wasn't about to back down. Karen thrived on confrontation, and she wasn't going to let me walk back in without a fight. She adjusted her sunglasses, tightened her crossed arms, and said through gritted teeth, "We'll see about that." And with those words, I knew exactly what she was planning. This wasn't going to be a neighborly disagreement or a polite discussion about property lines. No, Karen was about to bring out the heavy artillery of intimidation. I just didn't expect her to go as far as she did. Because in her world, calling the cops wasn't just an option. It was her first weapon of choice. Karen didn't waste a second after spitting out those last words. I watched her pull her phone out like a gunslinger reaching for a weapon, tapping the screen so hard it looked like she might crack the glass. Her lips were curled in that smug little smirk, the one that screamed she thought she had already won. "Yes, 911, she said loudly enough for me to hear every syllable. "I need police right away. There's a trespasser on HOA property. He's dangerous." Yes, he broke into the cabin. She emphasized the word dangerous like she was describing a wanted criminal instead of a guy holding nothing but a cup of stale coffee from a travel mug. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dangerous? Me? My patience nearly snapped right there, but I forced myself to keep calm. If Karen wanted a show, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of exploding. I leaned against the old porch railing, arms crossed, and waited while she finished her fake report. She even threw in a fake gasp for dramatic effect. "He's refusing to leave," she told the dispatcher. "Send someone quick before this escalates." Her eyes darted toward me, searching for any sign of fear. But instead of fear, I gave her the biggest smile I could muster. If she thought she could scare me off with a phone call, she had no idea who she was dealing with. 15 minutes later, a patrol car rolled down the gravel road, its tires crunching on the stones. The sight made Karen light up like Christmas morning. She waved both arms in the air as if she had just summoned reinforcements for battle. "Officer, over here," she shouted, running toward the car before it had even stopped. She practically threw herself at the deputy's window, pointing back at me like she had caught a serial burglar in the act. "That's him," she exclaimed. "That's the trespasser. He broke into HOA property and threatened me." The deputy, a tall man with a calm demeanor, stepped out and adjusted his belt. He took his time, surveying the scene, glancing at Karen's flailing arms, then at me, standing relaxed on the porch. He didn't look convinced. "All right, slow down," he said, holding a hand up to Karen as if he were trying to calm a hyperactive child. "Why don't you tell me exactly what happened?" Karen pounced on the opportunity. "I live here. I'm the HOA president. This property was abandoned years ago, and according to HOA bylaws, it reverted to us. This man showed up out of nowhere, broke into the cabin, and now he's refusing to leave. He's trespassing, and I want him arrested." Her words came out fast, rehearsed, like she'd been preparing this speech for months. I took a step forward, holding a folder I had already prepared for nonsense like this. "Deputy, my name's Mark. My grandfather left me this property 7 years ago. I've been away for work, but I've paid every tax bill, every maintenance fee to the county. This is the deed, with my grandfather's signature and county registration. And here are the tax receipts." I handed the paperwork to the deputy, who flipped through it carefully. Karen laughed, but it was shaky now. "Don't be fooled. He probably forged those. The HOA has jurisdiction here." The deputy gave her a look I'll never forget, the kind that said he'd heard enough nonsense for one lifetime. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "HOA jurisdiction doesn't override county property law. If this man has a valid deed in his name, then this property belongs to him, not the HOA." Her jaw dropped. "But, we maintained it. We landscaped, we trimmed the trees, we even rented out the lake for community events. That has to count for something. I couldn't help myself. I raised an eyebrow and said, "You just admitted to trespassing and profiting off my land without permission. That doesn't give you ownership, it makes you liable." Her face went from red to white in a matter of seconds. The two board members who had tagged along with her shifted uncomfortably, whispering behind her back. You could see it in their eyes, they were realizing Karen had dragged them straight into a legal nightmare. The deputy closed the folder and handed it back to me. "Sir, you're well within your rights here. If they give you any more trouble, call us. HOA rules don't trump property deeds. This land is yours." Karen's smirk shattered like glass. But instead of backing down gracefully, she doubled down. She jabbed a finger in my direction. "You may have tricked him with your papers, but you're not welcome here. This neighborhood has standards, and you're going to find out exactly what happens when you cross the HOA." The deputy gave her a stern warning. "Ma'am, enough. If you keep making false police reports, you could face charges yourself. I suggest you settle down." With that, he tipped his hat to me, climbed back into his patrol car, and drove off, leaving Karen standing in the dust of her own humiliation. But Karen wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Over the next few days, she escalated her campaign. I'd wake up to find letters taped to my cabin door, demanding that I pay years of back HOA dues. One notice claimed I owed $10,000 for community maintenance fees. Another threatened fines of $500 a day if I didn't repaint the cabin to approved HOA standards. The funniest one of all demanded I remove my pickup truck from the driveway because it did not meet aesthetic guidelines. I ignored every single one, but it was clear Karen was playing a long game. She wanted to wear me down, to frustrate me until I packed up and left again. But this time, I wasn't going anywhere. I started documenting everything, taking pictures of the bogus notices, saving copies of each letter, and forwarding them all to my lawyer. One evening, I caught Karen and two board members sneaking onto the property line, measuring the land with tape as if they were preparing to redraw the boundaries. I walked right up to them and said, "Do you people ever get tired of losing?" Karen jumped back like she'd seen a ghost, but then quickly recovered with that fake confidence. "This is official HOA business. We're confirming the limits of our jurisdiction." I smiled and pulled out my phone. "Good. Then you won't mind if I record this for the county to see. Because what you're doing right now looks a lot like trespassing." Her board members panicked and hurried away, muttering excuses. Karen stayed a moment longer, glaring at me, but even she knew she was cornered. The truth was clear, Karen wasn't fighting for the neighborhood. She was fighting to keep her grip on power, to control something that was never hers to begin with. And the harder she fought, the closer she came to losing everything. What she didn't realize was that the more she pushed, the stronger my case against her grew. Every fake notice, every trespass, every false police call, it was all piling up, and sooner or later, it was going to come crashing down on her head. And I was more than ready to let it happen. The deputy's car had barely disappeared down the gravel road when Karen spun on her heels and marched right up to me again, her finger jabbing the air like a weapon. Her voice was tight with anger, trembling not because she was scared but because she couldn't stand losing control. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think waving a few dusty papers around means you're safe here? Let me tell you something, this neighborhood is built on rules, and without rules, it falls apart. You might have tricked that deputy, but the HOA doesn't give up that easily." Her voice carried through the trees, and I could see blinds shifting in nearby houses. Neighbors were watching, listening. To them, this was just another episode in the ongoing drama of their self-proclaimed queen bee. But to me, it was war. I leaned against the porch post, calm and steady, and let her rant. The trick with Karen was simple. Don't feed her fire. She thrived on outrage, on getting a reaction. When I didn't respond, she stomped off, muttering curses under her breath. But I knew she wasn't going to stop. This was just the opening act. The next morning, I woke up to find bright yellow papers taped all over my cabin door and even slapped onto my truck windshield. They were official HOA notices, printed in bold letters, claiming I owed thousands of dollars in back dues and late fees for the 7 years I'd been gone. One letter warned me that further refusal to comply with HOA regulations may result in legal seizure of property. Another demanded immediate removal of unauthorized structures, which, apparently, meant my entire cabin. And the cherry on top? A threat of a lien on my land if I didn't pay up within 30 days. I stood there in the morning sun, peeling each notice off one by one, laughing to myself. It was ridiculous, but it was also dangerous. Karen was playing a psychological game, trying to bury me under paper threats. The average person might have cracked under the pressure, but I wasn't about to. Instead, I took pictures of every notice, cataloged them, and stored them in a folder for evidence. That afternoon, I drove into town and met with my lawyer, a man named Harris who had the patience of a saint and the sharpness of a wolf. He read through the stack of notices, chuckled, and shook his head. "They don't have a leg to stand on," he said. "HOAs can't just claim land because they feel like it. They can only govern what's under their charter. Your deed and tax records prove beyond doubt that this property is outside their jurisdiction. What they're doing here, these threats, these fake fines, is harassment. And if they rented out your lake without permission, then they may actually owe you money." I grinned at that thought. Karen, owing me money, that was a picture worth framing. But Harris wasn't done. He tapped the pile of notices. "Keep everything. Document every letter, every word they say. This is exactly the kind of behavior that gets them in trouble. They think intimidation is power. The law says otherwise." By the time I returned to the cabin, word had already spread. Neighbors were curious. Some approached me quietly, whispering that they'd always thought Karen went too far. One older man down the road, Mr. Daniels, leaned on his cane and said, "Son, she's been running this HOA like a personal empire for years. Most of us just pay the fines to avoid her wrath, but the truth is, she scares people more than she helps them. If you stand your ground, you'll expose her for what she really is." His words stuck with me. Karen's empire wasn't built on rules, it was built on fear. Days passed, and Karen's harassment escalated. I'd find HOA board members parked at the edge of my driveway, taking pictures of my truck, my cabin, even me when I stepped outside. One evening, I saw Karen herself sneaking along the property line, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes like some kind of obsessed inspector. I walked out and asked, "What are you doing on my land again, Karen?" She jumped, startled, then snapped, "This isn't your land, it's community property. I'm surveying for the HOA records." I held up my phone, recording. "Good. Then you won't mind if I show this video to the county sheriff. Because last I checked, trespassing is still a crime." She froze, glared at me, then stormed off without another word. The video went straight into my evidence folder. But the breaking point came during the monthly HOA meeting. I didn't go, but plenty of my neighbors did. Later that night, I started getting phone calls. Apparently, Karen had tried to rally the entire association against me, spinning wild tales about how I was a squatter, a fraud, and a danger to the neighborhood. But when someone in the crowd asked to see proof, she had nothing. Then another neighbor brought up the fact that they'd seen me showing the deputy my deed, and the deputy had sided with me. From there, the meeting unraveled fast. People started questioning why Karen had been spending HOA funds on landscaping and events at my lake cabin when it wasn't even under HOA control. Some demanded receipts. Others started whispering about mismanagement and misuse of funds. Karen's empire was cracking from within. The next day, she was outside again, pacing in her yard, phone glued to her ear, looking like a general losing a war. When she noticed me on the porch, sipping coffee, she shouted across the road, "Don't get comfortable. This isn't over." I smiled calmly and called back, "You're right, Karen. It's just beginning." Because what she didn't know was that Harris had already drafted a legal notice. A letter was going out to the HOA board, demanding they cease all harassment, retract their fraudulent claims, and compensate me for unauthorized use of my property. The law was finally on my side, and I had the evidence stacked high enough to bury her entire game. As the sun set that evening, casting a golden glow over the lake, I sat on the porch and thought about how far things had spiraled. All I wanted was to come back to my grandfather's cabin, reconnect with the land, and find some peace. But instead, I had walked into a storm stirred up by a woman drunk on control. Still, storms don't last forever. And Karen was about to learn that intimidation can only go so far before the truth comes crashing through like a wave. That night, as I watched the fireflies rise from the grass and the water ripple under the moonlight, I realized something important. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about standing up to bullies, about refusing to be pushed off what was mine. And no matter how many notices Karen taped to my door, no matter how many false calls she made, the law was clear, the deed was mine, and my resolve was stronger than ever. Karen thought she could bury me under her fake rules. But all she really did was dig her own hole deeper. And soon enough, she was going to fall right into it. The letter from my lawyer went out on a Monday morning, delivered straight to the HOA's official P.O. box and emailed to every board member. It was direct, sharp, and impossible to ignore. It laid out the facts in black and white. The land belonged to me by deed, the HOA had no jurisdiction over it, and every attempt to demand payments, post fines, or trespass was a violation of the law. It also reminded them that by hosting community events and renting out the lake without my consent, they had crossed into fraud and could be held financially responsible. By noon, I was already hearing rumblings around the neighborhood. Karen had called an emergency board session, and from the sound of it, she was panicking. I stayed at the cabin, watching from the porch as people trickled into the community hall at the end of the street. Cars lined the road, and neighbors walked in with arms folded, looking more curious than supportive. I could only imagine what was being said behind those doors. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with texts and calls. Neighbors were reporting chaos inside. Karen had stood in front of the group, waving the letter and trying to spin it as a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. People demanded answers. Why had she told them my land was HOA property when it clearly wasn't? Why had she used HOA money to maintain and rent out a property that didn't belong to them? Some even accused her of lying for years just to tighten her grip on power. By the end of that meeting, she had lost more than just her composure. Several board members turned against her, refusing to back her claims anymore. One man apparently stood up and said, "Karen, we trusted you. You've been running this place like your personal kingdom, and now we're all on the hook for your lies. Enough is enough." The room, I was told, erupted in shouts and arguments, and Karen stormed out, humiliated and cornered. The next morning, she avoided me for the first time since I had returned. No shouting, no finger pointing, no threats. She stayed inside, blinds drawn, while the rest of the neighborhood carried on. But her silence didn't last long. She still had one last card to play. That afternoon, I found an envelope shoved into my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note, shaky and bitter. "You don't belong here. You might have the papers, but you'll never be part of this community. People like you ruin neighborhoods. Don't think you've won." I held the letter for a while, staring at the angry handwriting, then set it down on the porch table and shook my head. It was sad, really. Karen wasn't fighting for the community, she was fighting to preserve her ego. The truth had stripped away her authority, and all she had left were empty threats. I decided not to respond. Sometimes silence is louder than any argument. But while Karen's influence was fading, the neighborhood itself began to change. A few days later, Mr. Daniels, the elderly man down the road, came by with a plate of cookies his wife had baked. He sat on the porch with me, sipping sweet tea, and said, "You don't know how long we've been waiting for someone to stand up to her. Folks around here have been paying ridiculous fines, afraid of speaking out. You gave us a reminder that we're not powerless. You've done more for this neighborhood in 2 weeks than she has in years." His words meant more than he knew. I hadn't come back looking to be anyone's hero, I just wanted my land. But somehow, in fighting for it, I'd given my neighbors the courage to fight for themselves. Soon, others began stopping by. One woman offered to help repaint the cabin, another brought over tools to fix the old dock, and before long, what had once been a battleground turned into something my grandfather would have been proud of, a community working together. Not because of HOA rules, but because they wanted to. The laughter of kids playing by the lake returned, and neighbors began talking to each other without the shadow of Karen's authority hanging overhead. Karen, meanwhile, was drowning. Word spread that she had been asked to resign as HOA president, and when she refused, the board voted her out. The same people who once trembled at her commands now turned their backs on her. At one point, I heard she tried to rally support for a lawsuit against me, but no one wanted to throw money into another one of her battles. She was isolated, left with nothing but her bitterness. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the lake gold, I saw her walking alone down the road. No sunglasses this time, no clipboard, no entourage of board members. She glanced at me on the porch, opened her mouth as if to say something, then turned away quickly and kept walking. That moment told me everything. Karen wasn't the queen anymore. She was just another neighbor, and one who had lost the respect of everyone around her. Weeks passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. I fixed up the cabin, replaced the old boards on the dock, and planted fresh grass around the yard. Sometimes, when I sat by the water with a fishing pole in hand, I thought about my grandfather. He always said the land was more than just dirt and wood, it was a place where family could grow roots, where peace could be found if you fought to protect it. I finally understood what he meant. The final nail in Karen's crusade came in the mail about a month later. A letter from the county clerk's office confirmed what we already knew: the HOA had no jurisdiction over my property and never would. They even issued a warning to the association that continued attempts to claim my land would result in legal penalties. It was official. The war was over, and I had won. That night, sitting on the porch with the sound of crickets in the air and the stars reflecting off the lake, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The battle had been exhausting, but it proved something important, not just to me, but to everyone watching. Bullies only win when people stay quiet. The moment you stand up and show them the truth, their power crumbles. Karen lost more than just a fight over land. She lost the illusion of control she had built her world on. And as for me, I didn't just reclaim my grandfather's cabin, I reclaimed the spirit of what it stood for. And in the end, that was the sweetest victory of all.